start this meeting of the Regional Planning Commission right on time. Well, it just flipped to 6:01. So tonight we start with a consent agenda and a minor tip amendment. Does anybody speak to that?
Not typically for the consent agenda. Usually it's just a motion, unless somebody wants to pull it off the consent.
Well, yeah, it would be item 3, Catherine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Oh yeah, action on consent agenda. Excellent. Get used to all these different, it was nice watching Mike do it and not have to think about the actual order of things. So are there any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, then we'll move on to public comments for anything that is not on the agenda. Do we have any members from the public here to discuss anything tonight? I don't see anything. So we'll move on to action on the consent agenda. So I guess we need a motion to approve the proposed tip amendments.
Move approval, Jeff.
Do we have a second?
I'll second, Chris.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, and then we then move to the minutes of the June 16th, 2021 meeting. Do we have a motion and comments? I just have one.
I move approval with Catherine's edits.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I have Wayne Howe should be the alternate for Jericho. It was not listed as alternate. Are there any other comments on the minutes? Well, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Yes, yeah.
Aye.
All right. Are there any abstentions? I should ask that too. Seeing none, let's move on to the biggie of the night, Transportation Improvement Program. We need a motion from the on the MPO side to open the public hearing.
I'll move we open the public hearing on the tip.
Second, Barbara.
Okay, fine.
All right. So we'll just leave this open. Does anybody want to talk about it or anything?
Sure, I'll talk about it. Let me share my screen, which I believe I've shared my screen, yes?
Yes.
So we did talk about this a little bit last month, so I'm not going to go into it, and I'm not going to go over everything again that we talked about, just a little bit of an overview. I think we have a few people who were in the board training who might be interested. We talked about this a little bit, so I thought I would just sort of briefly go over it. The copy of the tip, you can get to the draft on the CCRPC website, so hopefully everybody was able to see that. So this is the federal fiscal year 2022 to 2025 4-year tip. And as Charlie mentioned on the board training, for those who were there, the tip is a list of projects prioritized, fiscally constrained. And I think the main point to know here is that all projects that spend federal transportation dollars in Chittenden County need to be on the tip. And we have to do it by federal law. The tip is based on a continuing comprehensive transportation planning process that's carried out with the state and transit operators. And basically projects have to be ready to go. They have to be able to spend the money in the years that it's listed. The funds don't carry forward, they go away at the end of the period. So we want to be sure that projects are able to spend money. And important to note is that projects also have to be on the Transportation Capital Program. That's what gives VTrans authorization to spend money, and the money flows through VTrans. So for Chittenden County, they have to be on the TIP and on the capital program. There's also a state transportation improvement program, which is the statewide version of this. And basically this just gets incorporated into the statewide version. So yeah, TIP, STIP capital program. So mainly the information that's in the TIP, there's an explanation of what it is. There's an adoption resolution. There's a glossary of common acronyms. There are all the project list. So I counted it before this meeting started, and there's over 140 items listed here, individual items, which makes it pretty difficult to talk about this, but we'll do our best to sort of give you a good flavor of what it is. And the section 3 is just some summary tables and figures just to kind of let us know where we're going, where we are, and overall how the money's being spent. This is just what it looks like if you haven't looked at it. What we're really interested in are the middle columns. These are the amount of federal funds in each of the 4 federal fiscal years of the TIP. The TIP's organized alphabetically by town, alphabetically by project, and there's a lot of other information. If you have any questions about it, feel free to ask me. So the amount of funding that's in this TIP, this is federal funds, as I said before, a total of $254.7 million, which is a lot of money. It ranges, 2022 is $57.8 million, 2023, $105.2 million, 2023, $66 million, 2025 is $25.7 million. So to give you an idea of how that compares with recent past years, so you can see that with the exception of FY22, we're sort of in a similar range as what we've had in the past. The green in this chart are the Burlington International Airport projects. The shade of different color just because we don't have authority over those funds. That's federal FAA money, Federal Aviation Administration. So we just kind of show it a little bit separately. So what's going on in FY23? So there's several big projects in FY23. There's ends up being about 40 million higher than other years. And the big ones, we have a Exit 17 project that has about 15 million. Champlain Parkway has about 17 million. And then there's some major paving projects also on US 2, US 7. There's Class 1 paving in Burlington, Class 1 paving in Winooski, and then the normal range of projects. This chart shows how projects, the breakdown by major funding categories. Our largest funding category in this TIP is the new facility major roadway upgrade at 27.1%. That category is really due to 5 projects that are large that we've been working on for quite a long time. Champlain Parkway, there's $33 million in the overall TIP for that project. Rail Yard Enterprise, Exit 17 has 26 million. Crescent Connector has 7 million. And there's I-89 Exit 12, which doesn't have quite as much, but is also considered a major roadway upgrade category. The next highest is transit, 24.2%, the safety, traffic operations, and ITS, and then paving, and then it goes down from there. So this chart just shows the history of our spending by category. So the importance of this chart, I think, is that while we have a high spending on new facility, major roadway upgrade, our history over the past 10 years shows that this is not a trend that has happened over many years. This is just a little bit of anomaly with several large projects happening at the same time. By far, our largest category is paving. So I'm just going to kind of briefly try to talk about what is included here, and please stop me if you want to talk about any specific projects. As we said before, the aviation is just for information. It's 22% of the total. It's a combination of airfield projects, planning and environmental studies. There's always new snow removal equipment included, some new development areas, terminal building improvements, security projects, and noise mitigation. And then the new sidewalks and path projects. So these are bike ped, VTrans bike and pedestrian program and transportation alternative program grants. There's 8 towns are getting money from these projects, 4.4 million. And it's important to point out that, so this category is really just new standalone bike ped programs. What's not included is really all of the other projects. The intersection projects typically have crosswalk improvements and signal improvements. Our roadway projects often have sidewalks, have shoulders, have bike lanes. So this doesn't really capture all the spending in this category. It just captures these projects that are strictly bike ped and no other functions. Bridge preservation, we have 6 projects on this category. In this category, combination of there's 1 interstate bridge, there's 4 state highway bridges, there's 1 town highway bridge. That's 5.2% of the total. And then our intermodal, we have the Williston Park and Ride, which is set to be constructed next year, start construction next year. Sorry, wrong direction. So new facility, major roadway upgrade. We already talked about this, 5 projects, $68.5 million on this. Paving, there's 6 projects here. We talked about this a little bit. There's state paving. There's some class 1 town highway paving. There's a I-89, 189 project in South Burlington, $31.8 million towards paving, 12.8% of the total. Roadway corridor improvements. This is kind of a loose definition of projects that just sort of, that we would define as kind of a preservation project, but happens in a corridor. So we have exit 16, Vermont 2A in Colchester, and the Susie Wilson Road corridor in Essex. So that's 15.2 million, 6.1%. And then a large category, I think the largest number of projects is safety, traffic operations, and ITS. These are mostly intersection projects. There's a couple of rail crossing improvement projects. There's some signal upgrade projects. And then there's 1 roundabout here, the Shelburne Street roundabout. And then the rest are just our intersection improvements, intersection upgrades. And they're mainly, I mean, safety is one of the key issues for these projects, to improve the safety of the transportation system, 45 million. I'm on the wrong slide. Transit, this is a combination of formula funds from FTA, new services, funded with congestion mitigation and air quality funds. There's FTA grants, and there's elderly and disabled programs. 14 projects here, 48 million, 18.1, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong line. 61.5 million, 24.8% of the total cost. And the last category is stormwater and environmental. And these are municipal highway stormwater mitigation grants and transportation alternative grants that are awarded by VTrans for stormwater upgrades. There's 9 projects here, 2.2 million. We talked about the circ alternatives before, and in the training before this meeting, there was a question about the circ alternatives. So I just wanted to flash this slide up again, just to say that we are tracking the progress on the circ alternatives. There are, I think, 6 projects here that have been completed. And the remaining phase 1 projects are set for construction over the next couple of years. The phase 2 projects, there's 4 remaining phase 2 that are also listed for construction, and 6 of the phase 3 projects are also in progress. And then there's a list of a remaining 6 projects that have not yet been started for circ alternatives. So in that whirlwind, are there questions?
I don't see any hands.
I only have one comment. This is Bart from Richmond. One of the things that I've come across with our Route 2 discussions over the last 6 years has been, I'll just point out, this is more for the new folks. It's not always clear the category of a project. you know, especially about paving versus major road improvements, there's some oddities about the operational definitions, at least from our perspective. And from our highway foreman's perspective, you know, an example of that, where the Agency of Transportation is poised to remove concrete pads installed in 1927, rebuild the road underneath it, expand the shoulders, and that's been classified as repaving, which until about 6 months ago had been sort of discussed as a major road. So I just comment that the categories that some of these projects fall into is sometimes not obvious and may, at least to the uninitiated, look like they change over time.
And the categories that we have are not necessarily the same categories that VTrans has, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right in that comment. There's not a hard and fast definition of categories. That's true on VTrans's side.
Are there any other questions? Well, if not, are we ready to take action on the TIP and approve the Transportation Improvement Program for fiscal years 22 to 25?
So moved.
I'll second.
All right. All those in
It's
favor,
Jackie.
say aye or raise your, what?
I was just saying, it's Jackie Murphy who seconded.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your hands or say aye. Did you say?
Aye.
I was just going to say you haven't closed the public hearing.
Oh, you're right. Forgot about that. Sorry. Good call. Got to remember all these different little tidbits. My first tip program here. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would move we close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 And I'll
No,
move,
we-
I continue with my move for approval. of the
Yeah,
tip.
now we can go back to where we were. Thank you for catching that. I should write notes. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. Now we have to certify the planning process.
I can just say a couple words about this just to be, this is a requirement that comes out of federal law because we're a metropolitan planning organization. And basically we have to self-certify that first that we'll follow all the federal requirements as an MPO, and then that we, in awarding our federal money and how we spend our federal money, we won't discriminate against anyone based on race or age or gender, or that will give equal opportunity just to disadvantaged businesses and all of that stuff. And I think, yeah, and this chart that I put up just sort of gives an overview of what each of those 9 items means.
This
Does
is
anyone
John
have any
Zacconi. I move that we certify the planning process.
And I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye or raise your hand. Aye.
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 All right. Next is the committee member review volunteers. And I guess I'm supposed to do something.
Now, well, I'll speak to it. In your packet, you got a list of the committees and who are members currently. This is typically the time of year we kind of just pull this out and ask you to take a look at who.
Uh-oh,
Charlie, your sound just cut out.
yeah.
I think it's pretty apparent on the memo that you have in your packets that we're looking for a lot of board members on the Long Range Planning Committee that Jim Donovan had most recently chaired, and I had the pleasure of serving on. So if you'd like to volunteer for that, if you're new to the board, this is a great opportunity. And I enjoyed my service on there. I may still be tabbed on there. I'm not sure, Charlie, if you still have me as an incumbent or not. But let me put in a plug for Long Range Planning Committee. It's not that onerous.
Well, and it's a very important committee. I mean, that, that's the biggie when we do the appointments in the fall. Absolutely.
So I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so had to switch microphones there. So yeah, thank you, Chris, for picking up the ball. That is the big need. But also, if you could think over the next month or two, if you'd like to, either get off a committee or get on a committee, this will be an action item for September. And Bard, question or comment?
Yeah, maybe both. First a comment, then a question. Historically, it's been somewhat difficult for those of us who are further afield to make time for both the meetings and the travel. So maybe just pose the question of the intent in terms of the future about hybrid or virtual participation.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, at this point, at least I'm intending that we allow for hybrid meetings so that we get the equipment in our offices. If you're close by and you want to come meet in person, great. But if you're further afield and you like to plug in, we'll try to make sure we have the equipment so you can fully participate.
Great. Any other questions? Jeff, I see your hand up.
A comment, kind of like Bard's. This is a really good opportunity if you're an alternate for getting involved into the real meat and potatoes of what the MPO and the RPC do, because as everybody learned in the orientation session, we are a committee-driven organization in terms of the work load. And so just because you're an alternate doesn't mean you can't serve on one or two committees.
In fact, as we encourage it, as part of the bylaws.
It actually says that in our bylaws, yes.
Any other questions?
Tracy, question.
Not a question, but I just wanted to comment that if you're in need of long-range planning committee members, I would be happy to throw my hat in.
Great. Great.
Thank you.
This is terrific. Any other comments or questions? Oh, good. This is exciting. We're filling in the committee before even September.
And don't miss the September meeting because you may be appointed, so.
That's right. That's the key. If you're there, not there, you're
Yeah, that's for new board members. That's kind of a joke. We don't really do that to you, but you never know. It could happen.
Number 7 on our agenda is the policy participation mid-year review.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, we committed to creating this list of public policy, most often legislative discussions that we wanted to somewhere between monitor or engage in. And we committed to review that with the board every 6 months. So this is kind of our after session review. And then we'll look at this again probably in January as we're looking at what we think is going to be topics in the legislature. So I don't know how much time you'd like to spend on this. We've got 11 topics on this table right now. I'll kind of briefly run through them just in case you don't have the board packet handy. The first one is just continuing to monitor what's going on with the Clean Water Act implementation. The big issue for us in particular is clean water service provider. So we have been named in rule as a clean water service provider for the basin that includes a lot of our urbanized area, but also goes up into the islands and up to St. Albans. It's called Basin 5, or the direct to lake basin. So there's still more happening with that. And also the big part that we're always monitoring is also the flow of money. The legislature has allocated a lot more money to clean water in this past session. And exactly how that plays out, we will keep a finger on, certainly between Dan and I. And, we're always kind of trying to make sure the towns are adequately funded for the responsibilities that you have under the Clean Water Act. The second topic is the transportation bill. We just spent some time on the transportation improvement program, and we've been working a lot with VTrans on updating, as you may recall from last month, the prioritization and project selection process. So we'll keep engaged with that. Number 3 is the perennial Act 250. I don't know. Thank you, Sharon, for smiling. I thought she was going to either somewhere between a tear or a smile. But we'll see what the legislature takes up with regard to Act 250. It's hard to tell exactly what direction that'll go, but certainly has some significant implications for all of our work. Broadband, we may get a little bit more on the ground involved. The legislature did a lot of work on this in the last session. Now it's how does the money, how does the implementation of that investment play out? So stay tuned on that. There are definitely some conversations going on right now. Energy planning and implementation. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but the legislature, or in the next topic, but the legislature allocated some more money for us to help towns implement energy projects. So we will definitely be engaged in that work, and also monitoring what happens with the Climate Council and the Climate Action Plan and the Comprehensive Energy Plan, which are both underway this calendar year. Cannabis, we'll see. I think we're starting to hear some towns trying to figure out what to do in terms of their zoning. So we may, facilitate some multi-town conversations on that if there's interest. Project-specific TIF, tax increment financing, is something that was proposed in the last session. Kind of the flood of federal money kind of made it seem a little less urgent, but still curious to see how that plays out. Westford's not here tonight, but in particular, they're trying to do a small wastewater system in their village. Hopefully there's just money that flows from all the federal and state money available, but if not, this topic may come back up. Number 8 is just kind of a placeholder for equity related bills. There have been a couple of bills that have mentioned roles for RPC in terms of playing a convening kind of role, and also how do we address equity in our work, whether it's land use planning, housing policy, transportation policy, and investment. So I expect there's going to be more that comes there, including our own internally driven efforts. There's conversation going on about municipal self-governance, and there's these conversations have been going on for a long time, but they may be starting to focus up into something that the legislature can grab a hold of and accept. So we'll bring that back to you depending on where those conversations go. Number 10 is regional dispatch. For those of you new to our board, we tried to play a facilitating role in getting regional dispatch off the ground. So this is just kind of following that conversation and following that work as they move towards implementation. And then finally, 11 was the new thing we added was just the money and what's happening with the budget bill in the legislature each year and ARPA funding. So there's still details playing out there, and we're working hand in hand with VLCT in terms of trying to help our municipalities make sure they understand the guidance coming from the feds, and also as years go by, also are doing what's needed to make sure we're all documenting what's required in compliance with the ARPA requirements. So sorry, that was maybe a little bit long review, but one question we always kind of ask at this time, well, 2 questions. Is there anything on this list that you feel like should not be on the list? Or maybe the harder question, is there anything out there that is not on this list that you think should be, that we should be paying attention to? think of anything later, let us know, and we'll come back to this. And probably we also use this list, and this is particularly for folks new to the board. This list also informs our conversation when we do a legislative breakfast in early December. We've been trying to do that the last few years, and this list usually is a pretty good outline of the topics that we want to discuss with the legislators in early December. And Catherine, I don't know if there's anything more you want to say about that.
Not at the moment. I just have to prepare to get up at that time of the day to do the breakfast at the moment. Yeah, the only thing, I had some members of our community, which we have not voted on anything for cannabis, but somebody was concerned that already the small folks are being squeezed out because, the international or national companies have bought up what we have here for the dispensaries. And wondered, if the commission is going to be able to protect the small guys.
You're talking about the RPC?
No, just, this is, when you watch watch what happens in the legislature. So, to monitor.
You're talking about the Cannabis Control Commission.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. Yeah. And just for folks, again, new to some of these conversations, I think the RPC interest has been much more on the land use side. Like how are these uses, because there's a variety of uses, not just retail, but also production and processing. How are those regulated in terms of land uses, and what can towns do in terms of zoning to regulate those in a way that best works within the town?
Right. Any other questions for Charlie on this? If not, then we'll move on to the next discussion item, which is a fiscal year 22 budget and staffing discussion.
Yes, so I am going to share my screen.
Charlie, as you're doing that, if you could back away just a little bit from your microphone when you talk. I think when you transferred microphones, it's one that's way over stimulated. And I think if you back off just a little, it's easier on the ears of the rest of us. Thanks.
Wow. Okay. I will try to be nice to you. I apologize. I thought my mic wasn't picking up my voice, so I got closer and louder. Thanks, John. So I just pulled this up. We were going to have a topic about teleworking. Unfortunately, the speaker couldn't do it today. You're getting this instead, which is, I'm not mad at you. This is, nothing personal, but just as we as staff was kind of looking at what happened in this legislative session and the implications for us, I thought it was probably worthy of some deeper discussion with the full board. So this is just a few slides, and I'm hoping this is a little helpful. Our budget right now is 5.2 million. That's what you approved back in May. Mm-hmm. But note, I already started with excluding new and potential projects, and so there's some new things coming at us and some potential things out there that I wanted to discuss. But this is a stacked bar chart of what our budget looks like for this year. I notice it's $4.1 million of transportation work in this blue bar, 650,000 in the green, 365,000 in the gray, and 71,000 in the red. So that's the budget that you voted on in May looked like. So what's happened since then is these highlighted things. Transportation planning wise, we just applied for a big RAISE grant. RAISE is a US DOT federal discretionary grant to look at the possibility of, is there some sort of low density passenger rail service that we could ever get to serve our region? And this is not a new topic. This is the third year in a row. We've, in the summertime, we've applied to the federal government but it is a big topic, a big conversation that is kind of like an octopus, because to really get folks on board, we are going to have a lot of conversations with a lot of municipalities, not just in Chittenden County, but even our surrounding counties, to see if there's interest, support, and then is there a financial model that could make something like that work. It's spread over 3 years, so it's not a one-time hit, but that's hanging out there. We'll hear about that towards the end of the calendar year. So I've labeled that potential. In the natural resources area, there's $100,000 of new brownfields money, that's state money that the legislature allocated to all the RPCs in the state. So it's $100,000 per RPC. So that's good because we're just about out of brownfield. And so that's a new thing. The Regional Energy Committee support down here, the lower left, there's, I made a brief reference to this, that the legislature is getting serious about climate change and wanting to support implementation activities. They allocated $1 million to go to RPCs to help municipal energy committees with implementation activities. We actually have a job ad out there right now. And I think we're going to be interviewing in about 2 weeks. So stay tuned. There is some more support coming for your energy work if your town's working on that. But a new budget staffing pressure. Land use planning is staying pretty much the same. And then we have another chunk of pass-through funding, $200,000 from the Department of Health to the Racial Justice Alliance. So anyway, these are, since we voted in May, quite a few things have happened. And so what does this look like in this kind of stacked bar? We go from 5.2 to 7.4. And again, the big question mark is really kind of this federal transportation grant, because it's so big. And then getting a little bit deeper, breaking it down a little bit. And this is also, I think we had a discussion at the executive committee about helping the board understand where money goes in our budget and how it's used. I talked about $4.1 million in transportation money, but it's not all like just going to Eleni and her staff, right? There's a big chunk that goes to our staff, but then there's about $1 million that goes to partners. That's GMT, Green Mountain Transit, Catmo, Local Motion, VEIC. So that's about $1 million. And then about $1.5 million goes to consultants. And so you can see, just about as much goes to consultants. Well, $2.5 million goes out, about $1.5 million is the staff to manage all those projects. And then if we get that federal grant, again, a lot more consultant work and a little bit more staff time, and maybe I put $100,000 in there as a partner, which may be us kind of trying to bring in some more assistance to try to manage that, because this is a lot of consulting work. And Eleni turned on her screen so you can see her serious face. But this is definitely, this is a heads up conversation. If we do get this grant, we're going to have some more conversation about how we staff this in some way. I should pause. Any questions, thoughts? I'll just pause on the transportation piece here for a minute.
I see any hands up?
No hands, okay. On the non-transportation side, the three smaller buckets, the natural resources, It's, sorry, I'm forgetting the total number here. A good chunk of it goes out to partners, which is mostly other RPCs for the basin planning work. A good chunk also for consultants, again, mostly in brownfields. But about 220,000 of new funds in that area. The emergency management, Ken mentioned about $200,000 grant, 196,000 of that will pass through to the Racial Justice Alliance. And then land use stays pretty much the same, but we do have a good chunk going to partners, 140 grand, which is the CEDS, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy that we're doing with Central Vermont, Addison RPC and Rutland RPC, and the regional development corporations there. So that's 140,000 passing through us to partners for that work. And so this is the last slide, but just to kind of knit it all together, I tried to give you a little sense of the FTEs that all of that implicates. So we have about 11 FTEs on transportation work right now. That RAISE grant would be about half of a person a year for the next 3 years. At a minimum, that's just 150,000, 130, or we have another 100,000 there for some other consultant time to help manage that, but that could be a staff person too. So you might almost think about that RAISE grant as almost another person to manage that project. Land use, we have 3.5 FTEs. That's pretty consistent. The natural resources and energy, the regional energy committee support I just mentioned is basically another person. So we're advertising and interviewing right now for this position. Emergency management and health is pretty consistent, a little bit over half a person. But in total, that added up to 17.6 people, and we only have 16 people. And so I think we just kind of open up and some discussion to let you know the staff's feeling a little stressed with the demands that kind of came out of the session, beyond what we had already done in our work program. And I should actually, for those of you who weren't here in May, when we did the work program, particularly on the transportation side, we had extra money that carried forward from last fiscal year because of COVID, and Federal Highway told us that there was more money available. So our transportation program is probably as big as it has ever been, in addition to what the legislature also decided to add. So welcome, you are fully briefed on the situation, but questions, comments, thoughts, sympathy?
Yeah, sympathy. Charlie, it looks like because you've put the one full-time equivalent for the energy support, does that, add to it goes to 16 to 17, so you're down 6/10 of one, or?
Well, all of these added up to the 17.6 in terms of, so I guess you're right, yeah, so 16 plus one, we'll be hiring the one for the energy. The issue is really going to be if we get that RAISE grant in the fall. That'll be somewhere between a half and a full-time other person we may need.
Okay.
But we don't want to move ahead with hiring. I mean, that's a discretionary federal grant, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, because you don't want to hire somebody that only lasts a short time, because people, staff here really does like to stay and really provides a lot of institutional memory.
Yeah, and so I think we talked a little bit at the last meeting about this energy position. Because it's kind of a special allocation from the legislature, we don't have certainty about the longevity of that revenue source. We don't technically have certainty about a lot of these, because they go through the annual appropriations process in the legislature. But that's also a little bit of a concern about how long will that energy money last. Does this trigger any other thoughts or
any other questions? I have to screen. the list here to see if anybody has hands up. I don't see any other questions. So
All right.
I like the graphs.
Thanks, Linda.
Uh-oh, where'd everybody go? Something.
We're still- I'm going to stop sharing. I don't know if that helps you, Catherine.
Yeah, well, I also have one of these magic mouses, and you touch it, it goes, it just thinks that you're not sure what it does. All of a sudden, I was in my meeting space to the other Zoom. I'm terribly sorry. I am so technically inept, shall we say. It does make it tough for people who are much more attuned to watch me flounder here. Well, it just keeps you on pace here, Charlie, because the next is the executive director report, because, you know, I figured I'd just keep up the tradition of the chair passing it to the executive director.
We always have the opportunity, Catherine.
That's true.
So
Maybe you'll have something someday.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't include on here, I did want to a couple updates. One is on the equity work. Thank you for those of you that participated. I think we had the consultant had a focus group with some of you a week or so ago, and maybe there was one earlier this week. I can't remember this date that they were. And I think there's a third one scheduled. So I just want to encourage you, if you possibly can, to participate in that conversation. Number one. Number two is that there are other outreach efforts to get some input into that discussion. 2A is there's some focus group conversations happening with other partners in the community, other partner organizations, some of whom we actually do partner with and some we haven't partnered with too much. And then part B of 2 is that there's a survey that the consultant has developed that we'll be sending out to all of you. So even if you did participate in the focus group, the consultant would like to have you complete the survey. And we're also sending it to more, going a little bit deeper within each of the municipalities. So we're sending it to town manager, administrator, department heads, and your full select board. So if you can just kind of, I'll send an email probably tomorrow to you to just remind you that the survey is going out, and ask you if you can talk to whoever those folks are in your town and encourage them to complete that survey would be great. It's probably, I think it was about an 8-minute survey. I think could be done closer to 5 minutes, but it's a pretty short. And just trying to get some perspective, both regionally and municipally, on the issue of the issues around equity. So that was first update. Second update is, and I think Matthew may still be in this meeting, I'm not sure, or Amy, but there is the possibility that there could be a significant TIP amendment sometime in the within August. There's a process that happens with Federal Highway to reallocate unused funds, and I think Christine told me, I think the last year, maybe they got Vermont got like 25 million out of that process. Sometimes that is allocated to projects outside of Chittenden County. I think we're under the impression that there might be some projects within Chittenden County that could use those resources. So there may be a TIP amendment that gets passed around in August. I'm not sure of the timing. It might be late August. It might wait until your September meeting, but we'll see. So just a heads up on that. And it is time sensitive because it needs to be used before the end of the federal fiscal year at the end of September. So that was number 2. Number 3, any questions on either of those? All right, number 3, the comprehensive economic development strategy update. I think really just to let you know that we are doing engagement, and there will be additional engagement again, focus on underrepresented communities, or at least with a focus on underrepresented communities coming up in the next couple months. So just FYI on that. And then the last thing is, and we kind of touched on this a little bit about meetings and the committee meetings, but the public meeting exemption that was in place under the emergency order from the governor is gone. So we can no longer do public meetings without having someone in the meeting space itself. So we will resume doing that and make it possible for you to come to our meeting room if you'd like. We're probably going to have to get some more specifics. I guess let me put it this way. Please let us know if you're going to come to our office, so we know how much cheese and crackers and I don't know. We may have to feed you more seriously to induce you to see us again. I don't know. Maybe a pizza here and there. But do let us know if you're planning to come to our office for meetings, because we are going to go to, I expect over the next month or two, testing out hybrid technologies, and hopefully by September we're fairly functional with how to do hybrid meetings. So, but we aren't fully there yet. We'll figure this out over the next month or two. And that is the end of my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well, the next thing on the agenda is the committee liaison activities and reports, and they are in your packet as well as online, depending on what your choice of read is. We have a listing of the future agenda topics following that. Anyone want to talk about that one?
Sure. So September 15th, so 2 months from now, we are going to, as many of you as can join us, we'll meet in person at Hula. For those of you new to our board, we typically have had annual get-togethers that were a little bit more, some business, but also just some more networking and sharing that would happen in June. That didn't happen this year, so we're going to try to get together for the first time since maybe February 2020, this September. So it'll be, I think we're calling a little bit more of a celebration of just being able to get back together. But we will, for the business meeting, if you're not comfortable attending in person, we'll have a virtual option. So that'll be a hybrid meeting, and we can at least take care of business if you want to participate that way. And then we'll have just some social time and time to reconnect in September. So that's September 15th at Hula. And we'll have a few agenda items there. In addition to committees, we also need to reappoint the regional board members. So I think I saw Don Meals and Tim Bakley and those folks that represent different sectors of our community will be also on the agenda. So, and that's about all I have, Catherine.
Thank you. Are there any other members items? Are there member items or any other business? Jeff? You need to unmute. You can't unmute.
My mouse was disappearing. And I don't even know if this is an issue, and I just throw it out to the staff. When I was reading the bipartisan infrastructure deal that may or may not, still be alive after today's Senate vote, I noticed that one of the pay-fors in it was allow states to sell or purchase unused toll credits. And that automatically raised Lake Champlain Transportation Company flags in my head. And I just don't know whether we got to interact with Amy or VTrans or something about whether or not that pay for would have any implication on our funding constraint for our TIP or any other thing that we do in the state. I just vaguely remember more than 10 years ago, a toll credit issue came up that affected our funding. I can't remember what it was. It was, I think, even before you, Charlie. And I just want to make sure that when I read something like that, that doesn't trickle down to funding issues for us. And so the only entity in our county that is involved in toll credits is the ferries. So I just,
as the only person who's been here longer, I think we funded a project on the tip using toll credits.
right.
You're correct, we did.
So if somehow unused toll credits are sold for the purposes of funding infrastructure, is that going to have any implication on our funding as an MPO? That's the thing that I'm wondering. That's all. And they're unused toll credits, so I don't even know if that's an issue. My ears perked up when I was reading about the funding sources for the bipartisan infrastructure deal, which may or may not happen. And that was my members item, Catherine. Thank you for indulging me.
No, thank you for institutional memory.
And I think we'd all like to know more about toll credits, even if it's just that one instance.
Jeff, at this time, I don't think we have any unused toll credits. We didn't qualify in this past fiscal year.
Okay. Well, am I still muted? I'm not muted. The only thing I saw was this is a source of funding throughout the 10-year period, with a particularly intensive period, the first 4 or 5 years of the bipartisan infrastructure bill finances, Matthew. So maybe that it's good that we didn't have any unused toll credits this year, but if we have some in the future, I just want to know whether or not it's going to have any trickle down funding effects to us.
Okay, we can look into that and get back to you.
Great. Thank you. Are there any other members' items or other business? I don't see any activity. So this is Jeff's favorite time.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much.
Aye.
Thank you. It was